It's 1994, there aren't enough main event heels and the fans are losing interest. Here's everything that went wrong that year in the World Wrestling Federation. Things got off to a confusing start at the Royal Rumble, not because of a surprise return or a shocking elimination, but because the match didn't even have a real winner. Bret Hart and Lex Luger were the final two men, and they went over the top rope together and hit the floor at almost exactly the same time. The referees at ringside couldn't decide who'd won, so the decision was made to just declare them co-winners. Really, they should have had Bret win this. The crowd wanted him to win and they just didn't care about Luger. But Vince McMahon still hadn't given up on making Luger the new Hulk Hogan, and truth be told, he didn't really trust Bret as the top guy in the company. Looking back now, it's so clear that Luger was a bad choice. He was a total charisma vacuum compared to the Hulkster, and that had been obvious since the start of 1993. The Undertaker faced Yokozuna in a casket match for the WWF title. This was an absolute mess, as a parade of heels stormed the ring to help Yoko beat the dead man, and it was very sad to see that not a single babyface showed up to help the Undertaker, not even all-round good guy Sparky Plug for goodness sake. Then the arena went dark and the Undertaker's aura rose up from the casket, where he cut a promo before ascending into the rafters. It was meant to be dramatic, but it looked pretty ridiculous. In reality, this was to give The Undertaker 6 months off work, but he'd be back in time for the summer. Fake WWF President Jack Tunney announced that both Bret and Luger were officially recognised as co-winners of the Royal Rumble match. It was decided that they'd flip a coin to decide who'd get a title match first at WrestleMania, with the other person getting a shot against the winner of that match. Now, if wrestling was real, there is no way that this is how it would have gone down. A number one contenders match between them, either before or at WrestleMania, would have made far more sense. But apart from the weird booking in the main event storyline, WrestleMania 10 was a very good show. It was certainly 10 times better than the year before. Bret faced his brother Owen in what is still one of the greatest opening matches in WrestleMania history. And of course, there's that incredible ladder match for the Intercontinental title between Razor Ramon and Shawn Michaels. These are still two of my favourite ever WrestleMania matches. But we're not here to talk about the good stuff that happened in 1994, so let's talk about the WWF title. It was decided that Luger would get the first title shot against Yokozuna, which he lost via disqualification. Luger knocked out Yokozuna and went for the pin, but Mr. Perfect, who was the referee, refused to count. Then he disqualified Luger for shoving him earlier in the match. This was meant to protect Luger and keep him strong without him getting pinned or putting the belt on him, but what was the point? Vince really should have moved on from him by now. Although to be fair, there was a lack of main event level babyfaces at the time, especially with The Undertaker being out, but boy, the Lex Express really had run out of steam here. Vince did make the right decision in having Bret beat Yoko for the title in the main event, but as we'd see later in the year, it wasn't exactly a show of full confidence. The King of the Ring pay-per-view in 1994 was not a very good show at all. The only bright spot was Owen winning the tournament. He beat Tatanka, the 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon in the best matches of the night, and it really felt like Owen was going to become a wrestler on the same level as his brother in the WWF. It's a real shame that that never happened. So Owen was the good part of the show, and Art Donovan was the bad. This guy almost managed to ruin the entire show with his terrible commentary. He was an NFL Hall of Famer who had zero knowledge of wrestling, and he brainlessly went on all night while the fans at home slowly started to lose the will to live. Thankfully, they didn't ask Art to come back for SummerSlam. The show ended with an atrocious match between Roddy Piper and Jerry Lawler. You'll also notice on the show that the WWF title match wasn't the main event. Diesel vs Bret was literally the mid-card match, and the trend of not having Bret in the main event despite being the WWF champion continued at SummerSlam, where he faced Owen in a steel cage on the undercard. That match was fantastic, just like you'd expect, and it totally stole the show, so it's crazy to think that Vince still didn't fully have faith in Bret to lead the company. But nonetheless, we got Undertaker versus Underfaker as the main event of SummerSlam 1994. When The Undertaker was ready to return from his absence, there were no credible heels for him to face, so the WWF just decided to clone him instead. In the storyline, nobody knew where Taker had disappeared to, but people kept on saying that they'd spotted him out and about. These skits were fucking atrocious, by the way. They were all incredibly cheesy, and I have no idea where they found these people from, whether they were actors or real people. I mean, if they were actors, then quite frankly, get another job. Goodness me. Then Ted DiBiase showed up, claiming that he'd found the dead man and that he was bringing him back to the WWF. Paul Bearer, however, was having none of it and basically told Ted that he was talking out of his ass, and that's basically how we ended up with two Undertakers face to face in the ring. Taker 2 was the wrong height, he moved awkwardly, and on close inspection, he didn't look anything like Taker 1. It was like a guy doing a bad Undertaker tribute at a kid's birthday party. Even Leslie Nielsen, one of the funniest people on the planet at the time, couldn't save this angle. The match itself lasted about 8 minutes, and it was a total bore fest. Of course, the real Undertaker got the win, and as soon as it was done, the storyline was dropped, and it was never mentioned again. One thing that became very clear at SummerSlam was that Luger was now a mid-carder because he had a match against Tatanka. In the weeks leading up to it, Tatanka kept on accusing Luger of selling out to Ted DiBiase, claiming that he'd taken money and was going to betray the fans. Then at SummerSlam, Tatanka beat Luger with a roll-up before turning heel and joining the $1 Million Corporation himself. The WWF's resident Native American was the company's ultimate mid-carder, so losing to him really put a full stop on Luger's own status on the roster. Randy Savage was one of the few remaining superstars from the Golden Era, but he wasn't happy with his position. He still had so much to give in the ring, but Vince had sidelined him behind the commentary desk. I personally really enjoyed his work as a colour commentator. He was certainly better than Art Donovan, but I'd rather have seen him in the ring. And it turned out that he would rather have been in the ring too, so he made the decision to jump to WCW. It was said that Vince McMahon was really upset with his decision, but what did he expect? Instead of using one of the most recognisable stars in the company, he put a headset on him when he could have been useful in the ring, putting over younger talent. By 1994, he was past his prime, but not by that much, and he proved in WCW that he could still wrestle. At the Survivor Series, Bret Hart put the WWF Championship on the line against Bob Backlund of all people. Backlund had snapped after losing to Bret in a TV match over the summer, locking him in the crossface chicken wing and refusing to let go. From there, he spiralled into a heel character, ranting about morality and threatening to take back the title he claimed he'd never truly lost back in the 80s. It all felt completely out of step with everything the new generation was supposed to represent, but maybe that was the point. Anyhow, Backlund got his title shot, and even worse, he won. Owen Hart tricked their mom to throw in the towel at ringside, and that meant that Bobby Boy walked away with the belt. Fans couldn't believe what they'd just seen, and not in a good way. It felt utterly absurd, like the company had completely lost the plot. But just a few days later, the real plan became clear. he was just a shortcut, a middleman, a way to get the belt off Bret and onto Diesel without Diesel having to beat another babyface. If the WWF had spent 1994 building up real, credible heels, they wouldn't have had to hotshot the likes of Backlund or a fake Undertaker into the main events of their pay-per-views. No wonder so many fans were switching off by the end of the year. They couldn't even book Diesel's title change on TV because they'd already taped every episode of Raw for the month back in October, and with no pay-per-view coming up, they had to do it on a house show instead. Diesel was one of the few bright spots in 1994, but after spending the year getting him over, the WWF crowned him champion in the most underwhelming way possible. But of course, 1995 would be the real disaster when it came to Big Daddy Cool's reign as champion, and I'll be dissecting that in the next video. Oh, and if anyone can tell me what the Mantar was all about, then leave a comment.